Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I want to first of all ask you some questions about some remarks that President Zelensky made last week about the western Russian region of Kursk. He talked about the fact that they have no plans to withdraw from the area, that they crossed a red line and that, ultimately they were able to achieve it. I just want to get your take on their position now, and do you think it's sustainable, what they're trying to achieve?
Well, Ukraine has been attacked, and it is fair game for the victim of aggression to defend itself, also on the territory of the aggressor. That's international law. I think the incursion has already had a psychological effect in Russia, has already shown that Ukraine can take the initiative, that in a war it's never one way, that it goes through ups and downs, and both sides have initiative in various periods and in different fields. Remember, Ukraine won the Battle of the Black Sea and is again exporting its grain through the Bosphorus. Recently, Russia has had the advantage on land, mostly. But Ukraine has shown that it can surprise Russian forces. Therefore, the Russian leadership cannot count on this war going their way.
I guess, going back and forth in this way, what is the endgame? What would Poland suggest should be the endgame?
Poland would suggest that President Putin makes a phone call to his chief of staff and tells him to get the hell out of Ukraine.
That's not going to happen.
But this war could be ended in 5 minutes by Russia. Unfortunately, Ukraine does not have this option because it's desperately defending its independence and, you might argue, even very existence.
So then, given you say that the ball is in Russia's court, we don't think that Putin is actually going to do that at this stage.
Not yet.
Not yet. But what then do you think is the practical moves? Do you think that President Zelensky, the Ukrainians, should just accept that there is a part of eastern Ukraine that they're going to lose and that they're going to have to sit at the end of the day across from the Russians and negotiate?
I'm not sure why you're suggesting that Ukraine should give up its territory. Would you give up your territory? We need to stay the course in supporting the victim of aggression. There was a vote at the United Nations General Assembly, one of the most overwhelming votes in the history of the UN, to condemn the aggressor. This is not a press statement. It's law. And we have a duty as the international community to take countermeasures, to restore the respect for the internationally recognized border, the guarantees that the US, Britain, and above all, Russia gave to Ukraine in 1993 in return for Ukraine giving up its nuclear weapons. And also remember, Ukraine and Russia have a border treaty solemnly signed and ratified by Putin. So when you're saying they should negotiate, they have politics too, and we should stay the course in helping Ukraine repel this aggression.
Russia didn't give Crimea back, though, did it? Even though internationally it's not recognized. You've got thousands of Ukrainians dying, soldiers dying on the front lines every day. And in a couple of months' time, we could see a change in power in the United States. That's why perhaps I'm saying, are there other discussions being had, options that are being explored, rather than this war needs to continue? Because if Trump comes back into power, one of the things he said is, I'm going to end this war in 24 hours.
Well, there's a lot here. Of course, the war could be ended by Ukraine capitulating. But a world in which stronger countries can just invade neighbors with impunity and journalists calling on the victim to capitulate is not a world that I want to live in. I want to live in a world of rules where you cannot change international borders through the power of the fist. Yes, Ukrainian soldiers are dying. They are fighting heroically to defend their country. More Russian soldiers are dying at the rate of roughly 1,000 a day. This is a terrible war for Russia as well. Russia is destroying its national wealth financing this war. And the question is how long they can sustain it. We don't know that. These colonial wars usually take a while because for it to end, the Russian elite, above all Vladimir Putin, would have to come to the conclusion that he cannot achieve his aims, recovering his colony, at an acceptable cost. He's clearly not there yet.
Do you have faith in the United States sticking the course?
Well, Kamala Harris said in her acceptance speech that she believes in NATO and that she would continue the policy of the Biden administration, of which she is a part. From the Republican camp, we get mixed messages. Some people, close advisors to the former president, say that what they mean by ending the war quickly is threatening Putin with escalation of assistance to Ukraine, to give Putin more incentives to be more realistic. That's a scenario I could support.
I've spent time in Ukraine and I see the struggle that they face when there is a lag in weapons, or the countries they're relying on have some kind of political debate internally, namely the United States. That's why I ask these questions, because I want to understand better when I say what the end game is. Other than Ukraine needs to keep fighting, what if that is no longer the option on the table for them?
But it is. The European Union has supported Ukraine to the tune of about 120 billion. The United States, roughly 90 billion, mostly weapons, which is very important. Britain and Poland actually do a lot for Ukraine. Britain has just, I think, announced some extra measures. Poland is on its 45th package of assistance. We've provided 4 billion euros of assistance. But this is a tiny fraction of European economy or of
Could they be doing more?
I think we should, because the cost of deterring Putin, if he conquered Ukraine and came to the Polish border, would be much higher.
Well, you know all too well. I mean, is this something that the Polish people worry about?
Yes, we do. We've been invaded by Russia many times in our history. When they threaten us, we trust them. And we think it's better to stop Putin while we still can.
You had a viral moment when you spoke at the UN recently and responded to the Russian ambassador. In it, you said that Russia changes after losing wars. I just want to better understand what you mean by that.
Well, Britain took part in the Crimean War in the 19th century. Russia had reforms after that. Russia lost the war with Japan. And only after that did it allow a constitution, a parliament, and freedom of the press. Russia was knocked out of World War I, and it briefly had a liberal government. Russia lost the war in Afghanistan, and there was reform in the Soviet Union, Gorbachev, Perestroika, and so on. So a win for Ukraine is also a chance and a hope for Russia.
I guess Russia also collapses after losing wars.
Well, it's better not to start them. And the project of rebuilding the Russian Empire is more than Russia can achieve. This is completely unrealistic. And the only question is how many people have to die before Russian leadership realizes this?
Poland's in quite a unique position because even your far-right groups are pro-Western when it comes to Russia because they understand the threat all too well. But that's not necessarily the case in other European countries, for example.
Actually, I think public support is pretty solid on Ukraine. I think there are more divisions among politicians than among people because I think people know and can appreciate when they see evil. Purging whole provinces, stealing children. Let's not forget, Vladimir Putin is an indicted war criminal. Bombing civilian targets, hospitals, schools, housing estates. And for what purpose? For what reason? We, after 2 bloody world wars, we established a taboo that you may not invade countries on the pretext of coming to the assistance of your compatriots on the other side of an international border. If you have a gripe about that, you go to the Council of Europe, you go to the international courts, you don't send in the tanks. And these taboos are important.
On China, you've just recently returned from Asia. Are you worried that the United States, especially under a Trump 2.0, is going to become focused on its rivalry with China rather than investing in the ongoing war in Ukraine?
Well, rivalry China is here to stay, but the rivalry needs to be kept at the right temperature without boiling over. China it's a more complex relationship with China than it used to be with the old Soviet Union. I co-authored the European Parliament's stance on China, in which we coined the phrase collaborate where possible, terrorism, climate, compete where needed, mostly in the economic sphere, and confront where necessary, when we have using up intellectual property, or there are revisionist aspirations to change borders. All borders in the world are accidents of history. If we started changing them, it's a recipe for conflict and disaster. So we'd better live with the borders that they have. And we in Europe know that we would be affected by anything going kinetic in the Far East. That's why we don't want it.
So do you believe then Europe should stand with the United States when it comes to its attitude towards China?
United States is our most important ally, but China is a really important trade partner. So we don't want anything to go badly wrong, because then we would be forced to take sides. And of course, we would choose our best ally. But if you think that decoupling from Russia has been expensive through the energy prices, for example, sudden decoupling from China would be even worse.
And just briefly, if I can, Poland's position on the situation in Gaza, the idea of a two-state solution is also unique. I just wanted you to address that ongoing conflict because, the war in Ukraine has had globally a much more higher economic impact. But the war in Gaza has had a greater social impact in terms of how people and countries feel about it.
There's actually something that links them. The same Iranian drones and missiles that are being sold to Russia to attack Ukraine are also used to attack Israel. In Poland, we have sympathy for both nations. We have a fully accredited Palestinian ambassador at the head of state. We recognize the statehood of Palestine, but we obviously also recognize Israel's right to live in secure borders. And we think it's tragic that they cannot agree to have to separate and for both nations to live within their own states in a peaceful manner.
And just briefly, Foreign Minister, I know you'll say that the US election is for the Americans to decide, but are you worried about a second Trump presidency?
We don't take sides. Poland wishes to have the best possible relations with whoever wins.
Foreign Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.